officials below the cabinet rank in any of the departments. Period this spring when the Republic of Korea is probably going to go through a presidential change and a policy shift. So a little bit of calmness won't be a bad idea. And here I'd like to salute the President for his calmness to date. His response to North Korea's missile launch on 12 February was calmer than I thought it would be. He called on North Korea to fully comply with the United Nations Security Council resolutions. Period. Called on North Korea to comply with the resolutions. That's the kind of thing that Obama would have done and would have been criticized for. But Trump has launched a policy review, and it's going to take some time. So I think and none of the policy options are good. They're all dismal. So it takes some time to think this through. They have to be discussed with allies, especially if there's any preemption option in the works, because it's allies who are going to bear the brunt of any retaliation. So with that, I think I'll stop. You all had a long day, and I'm sure that there are comments to me.
Okay, now, Larry, we go one by one.
Just a question. Mr. Patrick, you made some interesting points. But I want to go to China, and one of the interesting points that I think you made was the possibility of using that as a negotiating point with China to get the Chinese to put more pressure on North Korea. From there, what kind of pressure do we really need from China that would have at least a possibility of breaking North Korea's will to continue with the advancement of their missile and nuclear programs? What would it take from China in terms of pressure to really get to North Korea's will, North Korea's ambition to continue with these programs, to really get them to consider pulling back or starting to make some concessions?
Okay.
Larry, that is such a good question, and it's such a fundamental question, and it's one I don't know the answer to. What could China do? Besides, what would they be willing to do? What could they do is the question here. China could cut off all of the oil that it sends to North Korea, and it's apparently cut that off for short periods of time before. So North Korea could be starved from all petroleum. It could cut off all of the trade, all of the investment, all of the food that they send to North Korea. But I'm not sure that any of that, and I don't think China would do it, but even if they did, I'm not sure that any of that would actually have the impact that we would want, that it would break North Korea's will. So take the oil. You think that would be the point that might be the most vulnerable? Well, North Korea can run its trucks on wood. They can burn wood. Go back to those days.
Not their taxes.
Well, no, they don't need taxis to live, though. They can just tighten their belt a lot of notches. The taxis wouldn't run. They'd have to really regress. And it's a good question, actually. It's a good question. Has North Korea middle class evolved enough that depriving them of taxis and other, accoutrements of the middle class life, would that break their will? I'm kind of inclined to think not. It's definitely worth thinking about. I'm just trying to answer honestly the question, and it's a very good question. I don't know the answer.
What about aviation fuels and gasoline for the military?
So North Korea has stockpiled, I think, enough aviation fuel to last 3 months, if I recall from unclassified sources. The classified probably have it better. And no war is going to last longer than 3 months. So probably that's not the key, the aviation fuel is my guess.
Well, I enjoyed listening to an interesting presentation of this discussion. Now, on North Korean issue, the topic is what options the Trump administration might have to take. There aren't very many options as far as I can see. Some things have been tried and failed, and a lot of people in town talking about a possibility of a preemptive strike, like you mentioned, and you define what they really mean by that. And you also discussed some of the strategic changes, whether U.S. should, American commanders are willing to redeploy nuclear weapons to North Korea, to South Korea. I would agree with you. I don't think that would really serve any purpose, given this security situation picture in terms of what North Korea has in its arsenal, including not just the Rodons and Scuds and traditional artillery capability, but also recently developed and tested intermediate range ballistic missile, and as well as some of you launched ballistic missiles, which could be very difficult for that or any other missile defense systems the United States has in its capability today to detect and to destroy in time. For example, there's a mobile launcher intermediate range ballistic missiles just move around. They can pop up from one of the cages that they have, and they can shoot. There will be not much warning, and you can't really tell whether a nuke was placed on the tip of a missile. You need time to detect all those things. It's going to be difficult. And that system is directional. It's directed toward the north and North Korean missile sites or what have you, or even Aegis and so forth. But once we have the submarine launch ballistic missiles, it can come from east or south or sea of the Korean Peninsula, even from the west, and it's going to be a lot more complicated to be effectively in deterring or defending or destroying incoming missiles from North Korea. Now, having said all that, you mentioned what 1994 Korean framework did. That was a part of first a successful negotiation between the DPRK and the United States, and I was there in Geneva in those days. And it had a limited impact, but it did something good, and eventually discarded by the Bush administration for its own reasons, and some of them are reasonable, some of them are unfounded, but nevertheless, that's history. Now, there is a room, I still think, for this administration, not that I would expect Trump or Kim Jong-un to have a Hamburg discussion, discussion of the issue or Hamburg, that's what he said during the campaign, but then he said so many other things as well. Now, but my point is, I think that dialogue and engagement is still an option, not very promising. Nobody argues that North Korea would, they should, but nobody argues that they would give up its nuclear weapons or other ambitions of its own. Now, but I think there are some problems with the idea, problem for the idea of promoting dialogue with North Korea in this town is that North Korea nobody has any positive or favorable image or attitude toward North Korea. And Don Gregg, the former ambassador to South Korea, said North Korea has been so demonized in town, in Congress, in the media, and in the administration. Under that atmosphere, nobody really can advocate and come out and say, we're going to push a dialogue with North Korea again. It's very difficult. Even fake news media do not support anything like that. But it is interesting, especially after all that has happened in terms of discussing North Korean issue. It seems to me that Trump has finally brought back the North Korean nuclear issue from back burner to the front burner through his assistants, his advisor like Madison and Tillerson, saying that North Korean issue is a high priority for this administration. So I think they established priority for the North Korean issue. But yeah, they don't know how they're going to deal with it. So I think there are some other options. So I don't think preemptive action, preemptive strike is an option. But I think the idea of having preemptive strike in reserve is good as long as it has some deterring effect on the North Koreans in that sense. And all the sanctions which did not work, but nevertheless, if we plan a program or policy roadmap that, as we did with the Iranians, when we go step by step and they did certain things, then we would start lifting some of the sanctions and so forth, so we can interlock these things into the progress of negotiations, if you will. But one thing about the China-North Korean relationship, only a couple of days ago, Pyongyang's KCNA put out a commentary calling China a neighboring country and blasted China by saying that what China said, this statement came out, China announced suspending all imports of coal from North Korea for the rest of the year. And they said what the Chinese measure amounted, he said in their word, tantamount to the moves of the enemies to bring down our socialist system in North Korea. And then they were not happy that China said North Korean missile technology is only at the beginning, doesn't have all these things. They complained about that. They also attacked the Chinese by saying that you were the ones who said when you were passing and joined the rest of the gangs, international gangs, to punish us with the sanctions, you're the one who insisted that there should be provision included in the resolution to allow humanitarian trade and the trade, including import of coal to China for the living of the people. And now you violate that as well. So to me, I think the side of DPRK, North Korean relations, has reached really lowest ebb in a long time. So on top of that, the assassination of Kim Jong-un's brother in Kuala Lumpur airport and what have you, I think the things are a lot more complicated. And also, Larry mentioned earlier the prospect of prospect of the election of a progressive president. Obviously, Moon Jae-in is out there on the front now, but it is likely that next president of South Korea will be a progressive president rather than conservative, similar to Lee Myung-bak or Park Geun-hye, and that could provide another challenge for the United States policy on for the Korean Peninsula. How we're going to cope with that. And that is still an open issue, and opposition is still insisting that final decision of that deployment should be discussed and approved by the National Assembly. And in other words, they have to revisit it, and it should be given given an opportunity to the next president to decide, not the, instead of carrying on the quarterly agreement that has been reached between Seoul and Washington.
Thank you, Tom.
Why do you think the Chinese are so sensitive to Korea stationing THAAD on the Korean Peninsula? What's their logic? Do you think they're justified in their concerns? And a follow-on would be, have the Chinese approached the United States directly with these concerns or accusations? And what do you know of that? And as you're thinking about the answer to these questions, I just want to respond to what Larry said. And I was quite surprised at the ban the Chinese torpedo mentality that a lot of the Koreans that I met back in Korea had about Chinese sanctions. They don't care if they don't import our cosmetics, if they don't import our entertainment products, or they disregard our tourism. I just want you to know that the Koreans that I met, who were mid-level company businessmen, were more than willing to take the brunt of Chinese economic pressure. Also, I just want to say that the North Koreans invented Uber, so I think that we won't have to worry about it. I mean, that's one aspect of oil restrictions that they will be able to overcome. Thank you.
Okay, Bill?
Yeah, one option that I no longer heard is the change option. And by that I don't mean regime change, I mean changing the system. You mentioned, I think quite accurately, the Chinese are afraid of change.